I'd just like to put a question out there today. Are you an optimist? Would you regard yourself as an optimistic person? I like the dictionary.com definition of optimism. They define it as a disposition or tendency to look on the more favorable side of events or conditions and to expect the most favorable outcome. I'm sure many of us would agree that it's generally good to be optimistic, to be a glass half full person rather than constantly complaining that the glass is half empty. So it's a good thing to be an optimist, but what I'd like to put across today is, friends, we need the right kind of optimism. And I'd just like to illustrate this with a couple of simple examples. Just imagine a university student who is heading for a very important exam. And it's a real make or break exam, and his fellow students have got their heads down, they're studying hard, they're intense, and they're busily preparing for this exam. But they notice that he's quite laid back about it. He's not doing very much study at all. He's spending a lot of time watching sport and playing video games and having a nice time, but they notice he's not really doing much study. So they talk to him about it, and he responds, "It's all good. I've got this, it's all up here," and he's very, very optimistic. But then he sits the exam and fails it. He was optimistic, but maybe he wasn't realistic. He was very, very positive about his chances, but maybe that positivity was misplaced. Whereas had he studied harder and had a combination of hard work and optimism, I'm sure he would have done better. Or another example, just say that a young lady enters a relationship and very quickly, within 2 or 3 weeks, she agrees to marry this man. And her friends, they observe it, and it's happened so fast that they're alarmed. But she's very optimistic. She says, "It's fine, I know what I'm doing, I'm a good judge of character, and I'm excited about marrying this man who she doesn't really know very well." You know, would it not be true to say that, yes, there is optimism, but we need the right kind of optimism? Otherwise, we can be in denial, we can be caught up in wishful thinking, or a phrase people sometimes use, we can be off with the fairies, where we're very positive about something, but just not really in touch with reality. So the optimism we need really has to have a foundation. And there's a tremendous example of this in the Old Testament. In Numbers chapter 13, Joshua and Caleb set a great example. Many of you would know the story that 12 Israelite spies went in to check out the promised land, the land of milk and honey God had promised for his people, and 10 of them came back negative. They were very pessimistic, and they actually said, "We are not able to go against the people." And they spread a negative report and influenced the nation. But Joshua and Caleb, on the other hand, were very optimistic. And I'll read you the actual words. They said, "Let us go up at once, for we are well able to overcome it." So there's a stark contrast. The 10 spies said, "We're not able." Joshua and Caleb said, "We are able." So they were ready to go in and occupy the land. But what I want to put to you is that if we look carefully at that passage, their optimism had a foundation. It wasn't self-belief. It wasn't detached from reality. That their confidence wasn't in themselves. They weren't in denial or unrealistic. They had what the Bible would describe as faith. They had seen God's power. They'd seen him part the Red Sea. They'd seen God provide manna. They'd seen God provide water out of the rock. So God had a tremendous track record of acts of power and keeping his word. So on the basis of that, their confidence was in God. They had an optimism, but it was rooted in something strong. And this is what they actually say in Numbers 14 to the Israelites. "If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us." Oh yes, that's the kind of optimism we need, where they've got a strong confidence in God. Again, it's what the Bible calls faith. So what I'd like to put out there today, that yes, we ought to be optimistic. It's a good thing to be optimistic. And going back to that original definition from dictionary.com, it's good to expect a favorable outcome, but it's so important that that optimism be rooted in faith in God. That's why we're so upbeat. That's why we're so positive, because we believe in God. We believe in his word. He is faithful to keep his promises. May God help us to have this kind of positivity, always trusting in the Lord and then looking out for the outcome that He has chosen.